Donald J. Trump, the 45th and 47th President of the United States, is one of the most polarizing figures in modern political history. While he maintains a fiercely loyal base of supporters, he also evokes intense opposition and even hatred from many others, both within the US and globally. The reasons for this strong dislike are complex and multifaceted, involving his rhetoric, policies, behavior, and impact on institutions. Understanding the roots of this animosity requires looking beyond partisanship into broader cultural, historical, and psychological contexts. Here are the top 6 reasons why Donald Trump is hated so much. 1. Rhetoric and behavior. From the moment Donald Trump descended the golden escalator in 2015 to announce his candidacy,
running for President of the United States,
his style was anything but conventional. He didn't speak like a politician. He spoke like a brawler, with sharp jabs and no filter punches. Trump took aim at his opponents not with policies alone, but with names that stuck like glue. Sleepy Joe, Crooked Hillary, and of course, his ever-present battle cry against the fake news. For his supporters, this no-nonsense, tell-it-like-it-is approach was refreshing. But for many others, including political moderates and independents, it was jarring. They saw not a leader, but a man who used the bully pulpit to actually bully, replacing presidential decorum with reality show drama. As the years went on, his rhetoric didn't soften. It hardened, especially around issues of race and identity. When he launched his campaign, he painted Mexican immigrants as criminals and rapists, sparking an immediate firestorm. Later, he signed an executive order targeting Muslim-majority countries, a move critics dubbed the Muslim ban. And after the deadly white supremacist rally in Charlottesville in 2017, Trump's comment that there were very fine people on both sides sent shockwaves through the country. Then came the tweet that told 4 congresswomen of color to go back to the countries they came from, despite the fact that all but one were born in the United States. To many, it was a clear message of exclusion. To his critics, it wasn't just poor judgment, it was racism, plain and simple. Through it all, protests erupted, headlines flared, and the country seemed to grow more divided with each passing tweet. To understand why Trump remains such a polarizing figure, one need only trace the trail of his words. Words that inspired fierce loyalty in some and deep resentment in many others. Before the election, mid-2023 to spring 2024, it all began at Mar-a-Lago. In the heat of mid-2023, Donald Trump formally launched his campaign for the 2024 presidency. This time, his tone was different, or so it initially seemed. He leaned heavily into themes like crime, trade, and restoring what he called American greatness, brushing off the cautious advice of his inner circle. His supporters cheered his defiance, but political observers noticed that something darker was brewing beneath the surface. As the months rolled on, researchers at UCLA noticed a chilling trend. Trump's language was becoming increasingly violent and exclusionary. Words like bloodbath, murderers, rapists, and thugs crept into nearly 2% of his public statements, surpassing levels typically seen in Democratic leaders and drawing parallels to authoritarian regimes. His speeches, once rooted in broad populist appeals, began to divide sharply. No longer we the people, but us versus them. The them being immigrants, the press, and political elites. By late 2023, Trump's focus had zeroed in on immigration with jarring intensity. He claimed that undocumented immigrants were poisoning the blood of our country, echoing rhetoric long associated with white nationalist ideology. He depicted migrants as stone-cold killers and animals, alleging that foreign governments were dumping their worst criminals onto American soil. Critics from across the aisle decried the fear-mongering, but the message was clear. Trump was building his campaign on grievance and menace. During the campaign, summer to fall 2024, as summer faded and election season heated up, Trump's rhetoric reached new levels of danger. At rallies and town halls, he warned without evidence that the upcoming vote was ripe for fraud. In September 2024, just weeks before ballots were cast, he declared he would prosecute anyone who cheated, including election officials. He even urged police to watch the polls, prompting alarm over potential voter intimidation. His rallies became stages for martial language and dystopian visions. Over and over, he spoke of an enemy from within, At times, he even floated the idea of using the National Guard or military to suppress internal threats, though he never clearly defined what those threats were. In one particularly shocking moment, he joked that someone would have to shoot through the fake news to get to him, and then shrugged, "I don't mind that so much." Extreme proposals followed. Trump vowed mass deportations on day one. He called for the death penalty for undocumented migrants who killed Americans or police officers. He even demanded prison time for anyone who burned the American flag proposals, many legal scholars deemed blatantly unconstitutional. His attacks became increasingly personal. He targeted Vice President Kamala Harris, calling her mentally impaired and using slurs such as retarded language that ignited outrage from disability advocates and even some within the Republican Party. But Trump remained unrepentant, feeding the fervor of crowds who cheered him on. After the election, late 2024 into 2025, Trump didn't go quiet after the election, far from it. By mid-2025, he was once again making headlines, this time by accusing former President Barack Obama of treason. He claimed Obama had conspired to rig the 2016 election, a theory widely dismissed as baseless. Ironically, the very legal immunity Trump once championed now shielded Obama from any real consequences. Then came the AI videos. Trump circulated doctored clips of Obama being arrested, footage widely recognized as fake, but used by Trump's base to fuel conspiracy narratives. He amplified claims from political figures like Tulsi Gabbard, suggesting sinister plots without offering evidence. The conspiracies didn't stop there. Trump alleged that celebrities Beyoncé, Oprah Winfrey, and Al Sharpton had been illegally paid millions to endorse Harris. He called for their prosecution, though all involved flatly denied the claims, and no proof ever surfaced. Simultaneously, Trump intensified his war on the media. Long known for calling the press fake news, he now claimed certain networks were illegal and revived the authoritarian phrase, enemy of the people. Analysts noted the consistency and the escalation of these attacks. As 2025 progressed, a growing chorus of experts warned that Trump's rhetoric had shifted into something more dangerous. His language and tactics resembled those of strongmen, not democratic leaders. The themes were unmistakable: undermine institutions, spread fear, cast doubt on elections, and never concede defeat. 2. Policy and governance. Donald Trump's presidency wasn't just defined by his words, it was marked by a series of bold, controversial policy choices that left a deep imprint on American society and politics. One of the earliest and most defining battles was over immigration. Trump didn't just talk tough, he governed tough. His administration separated families at the border, built new stretches of a border wall, and drastically cut refugee admissions. Images of crying children behind chain-link fences shocked the world and became a haunting symbol of what critics called the cruelty of his policies. While some praised him for enforcing immigration laws with a firm hand, many others, especially human rights advocates and moderates, saw these actions as a betrayal of American compassion. Then came a sweeping rollback of environmental protections. Trump pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement, a global pact to combat climate change. He championed coal and oil, undoing Obama-era rules meant to reduce emissions and protect the environment. To environmentalists and climate scientists, it felt like watching the clock turn backward at a time when the world needed urgent action. But it was the COVID-19 pandemic that cast the longest shadow over his presidency. As the virus spread across the globe, Trump was often seen minimizing the threat. He floated questionable treatments, famously suggesting that disinfectant might help, and promoted unproven drugs like hydroxychloroquine. He publicly clashed with scientists and health officials, while turning basic safety measures like mask wearing into political statements. What could have been a moment of national unity instead deepened existing divides. Perhaps most alarming to many were Trump's actions that appeared to undermine the very foundations of American democracy. He relentlessly claimed that the 2020 election was rigged, even after courts and officials across the country rejected those claims. Behind closed doors and sometimes in public, he pressured election officials to overturn results. And on the 6th of January, 2021, his words helped ignite a violent mob that stormed the U.S. Capitol in an attempt to stop the certification of the election. To his supporters, Trump was a fearless leader who challenged the establishment and put America first. But to critics, his policies and actions painted a far more troubling picture. One of a leader willing to sidestep democratic norms, disregard science, and divide the nation in pursuit of power. The second coming of Trump's 2025 presidency began anon. A cold morning, the 20th of January, 2025, Donald J. Trump took the oath of office for a second term. Unlike the grandeur of his 2017 debut, this inauguration was less about spectacle and more about speed and force. Hours after stepping back into the Oval Office, Trump launched a barrage of executive orders, signaling that this would be a presidency driven by the pen and a mission to undo the legacy of his predecessor. The very first wave of orders targeted what Trump viewed as the ideological heart of Biden-era governance. He revived Schedule F, giving the White House sweeping power to fire federal workers deemed disloyal or ineffective. Diversity, climate, and LGBTQ protections were gutted in one stroke. DEI programs were shut down, climate regulations scrapped, and transgender protections reversed. Trump wasn't just taking office, he was tearing down what came before him. Barely a week into his presidency, Trump declared a national emergency at the southern border. Troops were deployed. The Remain in Mexico policy was reinstated. Catch and release ended. New walls were ordered. And in a legally controversial move, Trump called for the end of birthright citizenship, setting off a storm of litigation. In one of the boldest moves of his return, Trump signed Executive Orders 14151 and 14173, effectively dismantling decades of affirmative action and federal anti-discrimination policies. Across agencies and federal contracts, Delaware IA programs were shut down. In their place, a new doctrine emerged: strict merit, based enforcement, stripped of race, gender, or identity considerations. Further, Trump moved to redefine sex in legal terms based solely on reproductive biology. Transgender protections in federal prisons, youth facilities, the military, and schools were rolled back. Funding for gender transition services was cut. The message from the administration was unflinching: biological sex over gender identity, and a rejection of what they called woke policy creep. Also, in a dramatic flourish, Trump declared a national energy emergency. The U.S. promptly withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Health Organization, echoing his first-term doctrine of withdrawal from multilateral obligations. Green energy mandates were shredded. Electric vehicle requirements were reversed. Offshore wind leases were halted. Fossil fuel permits fast-tracked. Pipelines resurrected. Drilling expanded into Alaska and federal lands. The rallying cry was clear: drill, baby, drill, for prosperity, energy independence, and consumer relief. The Doge Revolution. Bureaucracy rebooted. The word Doge became a household name. Determined to shake up Washington's entrenched systems, Trump issued a freeze on federal hiring and regulations. But the real twist was his creation of an unofficial reform body, the Department of Government Efficiency, nicknamed DOGE, led by Elon Musk. DOGE's mission: slash budgets, flatten bureaucracy, and eliminate redundancy. Trump also moved to curb the independence of regulatory bodies like the FTC and SEC, demanding they fall in line with White House priorities. Critics warned of executive overreach, but to Trump's team, this was a long overdue reset. Through Executive Order 14182, Trump reinstated the Hyde Amendment, effectively banning federal funding for most abortions. Biden-era directives on reproductive health were overturned, and funding to international reproductive programs was severed. In a symbolic move, he also reinstated U.S. troops previously discharged for refusing COVID-19 vaccines, offering back pay and public vindication. It was a loud reversal of pandemic-era mandates and a nod to individual liberty, as Trump framed it. In July 2025, Trump turned his attention to technology. Teaming up with Silicon Valley power players like Jensen Huang and David Sachs, he launched a sweeping AI action plan. 3 executive orders dismantled Biden-era safeguards. Restrictions on data centers and model training were loosened. State-level red tape was cut. Most controversially, Trump's orders mandated that AI models remain free from ideological bias, targeting what he and his base called woke AI. To critics, it was corporate deregulation meets culture war. To supporters, it was innovation unshackled. A presidency by executive order was also in vogue. By mid-2025, Trump's governance style was unmistakable, swift, centralized, and top-down. His White House leaned on executive orders more than legislative compromise. Immigration, energy, gender, health, and tech were all redrawn with a signature stroke, often without congressional input. The public, however, remained polarized but unmoved. Approval ratings hovered near 40%, almost impervious to scandals or headlines. His critics feared creeping authoritarianism. His followers saw restoration and bold leadership. Trump wasn't just governing, he was rewriting the American rulebook again by the enactment of the Big Beautiful Bill, which experts warn that the bill, if passed, will cause millions of Americans their Medicaid and SNAP assistance, whilst making the rich to be richer. 3. Personal conduct and ethics. Beyond the policies and the speeches, Donald Trump's presidency was shadowed by ongoing questions about his personal conduct and ethics, a narrative that played out in courtrooms, newsrooms, and the public imagination. Long before he took office, Trump was known as a real estate mogul with a flair for controversy. But once in the White House, his business dealings drew sharper scrutiny. Investigations piled up into his taxes, into whether he used his charity, the Trump Foundation, to benefit himself, and whether he blurred the lines between public duty and private profit. From hotel stays by foreign dignitaries to unexplained financial maneuvers, critics raised one recurring question. Was the presidency being used to enrich the man holding it? But the ethical concerns didn't stop at business. Over 24 women came forward with allegations of sexual misconduct, ranging from unwanted advances to outright assault. The release of the now infamous Access Hollywood tape, in which Trump was heard bragging about groping women, only deepened the scandal. While some dismissed it as locker room talk, many saw it as damning proof of misogyny and a troubling pattern of behavior. And then there was the personality behind the power. To his detractors, Trump embodied a dangerous kind of narcissism. They pointed to his constant need for praise, his refusal to accept responsibility, and his harsh treatment of anyone who showed disloyalty. Empathy, humility, or self-reflection traits traditionally expected of a president seemed in short supply. Instead, Trump often made crises about himself, measuring events by how they impacted his image or approval ratings. For millions of Americans, these traits were more than just character flaws. They were red flags. In a country built on shared values and diverse voices, they saw a leader whose conduct reflected not unity or service, but ego and self-interest. And that, for many, was the heart of their disillusionment. Before Donald Trump even stepped back into the White House in January 2025, he had already reignited controversy. He launched World Liberty Financial, a crypto venture co-founded with his sons. Ethics experts immediately flagged the project as a glaring conflict of interest, arguing that foreign investors could use crypto as a backdoor to gain favor with the new administration. By May, the concerns only grew louder. Trump hosted an opulent $148 million dinner at one of his golf resorts. The guest list wasn't made public, but reports confirmed that top buyers of his personal meme coin, Dollar Trump, were in attendance, many of them foreign nationals. His businesses earned hundreds of millions in fees connected to the coin. Observers didn't mince words. It wasn't just a dinner. It was, in the words of one analyst, a transactional sale of access to the presidency. In the early days of his second term, Trump moved swiftly to reshape the federal landscape. 17 inspectors, general independent government watchdogs, were fired within weeks. Among them was the head of the ethics office, David Whitema, who had publicly criticized Trump's crypto involvement. His replacement was a close political ally. The purge was met with outrage from both sides of the aisle, though legal efforts to reinstate the watchdogs floundered. Trump didn't stop at personnel changes. He also gutted long-standing ethics rules. Restrictions on gifts from lobbyists were scrapped. Former lobbyists were once again allowed to take regulatory roles overseeing the very industries they'd represented. Enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, a key anti-bribery law, was quietly halted. For ethics experts, it was an unprecedented rollback of the safeguards designed to stop government self-dealing. In March, a spectacle unfolded on the White House lawn. Standing shoulder to shoulder with Elon Musk, Trump praised Tesla vehicles in glowing terms. The moment played like a live infomercial. drawing condemnation from lawmakers who accused him of abusing his office to pump up a private business. Senators Adam Schiff and Elizabeth Warren demanded a formal investigation. The White House responded by insisting Musk had recused himself from any policy discussions, but many saw the stunt as emblematic of Trump's no apologies, business-first presidency. Then came April, and with it, a suspicious swing in the markets. Trump publicly urged investors to buy stocks just days before he announced a freeze on planned tariffs, causing a market surge. Congressional Democrats accused him of manipulating markets for personal or political gain and called for an insider trading investigation. The Office of Government Ethics declined to comment. By May, the scandal machine was back in full swing. Trump accepted a $400 million luxury jet from the Qatari government, allegedly for use as Air Force One and later for donation to his presidential library. Critics saw it as a thinly veiled bribe. Senator Tammy Duckworth blasted the deal, warning taxpayers would be stuck with expensive modifications to accommodate the jet, despite the country already owning 2 functional presidential aircraft. At the same time, Trump found himself again entangled in the long shadow of Jeffrey Epstein. Newly released documents linked him to events and associates tied to Epstein's circle. The administration pushed back, claiming there was no client list, but Congress was unconvinced. Subpoenas followed, and Trump's refusal to fully comply only deepened public skepticism. As scrutiny intensified, Trump went on the offensive, filing a $10 billion defamation lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch. The suit came after the Journal reported that Trump had contributed a lewd cartoon to an Epstein birthday card. Critics labeled the lawsuit a calculated attempt to chill the press and silence further inquiry. Things escalated further when reports emerged that Trump had instructed his Deputy Attorney General to personally interview Ghislaine Maxwell. Senator Chuck Schumer didn't hold back, calling the move an outrageous interference in the justice system and suggesting Trump was orchestrating a cover-up to protect himself. Simultaneously, Trump established what he called the Weaponization Working Group at the Department of Justice. The group's purpose? To review criminal cases Trump believed were politically motivated, including those involving the 6th of January defendants. Alarm bells rang throughout Washington. Several of the group's leaders had direct ties to the January 6th movement, leading critics to accuse Trump of using federal law enforcement to settle political scores and insulate himself from accountability. In just a few months, Trump had managed to redefine the ethical boundaries of American leadership, once again melding personal business, public power, and legal authority into a singular, chaotic force. The question now was not whether his conduct broke the mold, but whether the mold could ever be repaired. 4. Media and cultural influence. From the very beginning of his political resurgence, Donald Trump made it clear the media wasn't just wrong, it was the enemy. At rally after rally, he pointed fingers, calling out reporters by name and branding entire news organizations like CNN, The New York Times, and The Washington Post as purveyors of fake news. For his supporters, it became a rallying cry. For journalists and democracy advocates, it was a chilling signal, a direct threat to the idea of a free press. Trump's approach wasn't just about discrediting unfavorable coverage, it was about rewriting the narrative altogether. His administration frequently circulated misinformation, not as a glitch in communication, but as a deliberate tool. Reality became a matter of loyalty. If you believed Trump, you were part of the movement. If you questioned him, you were part of the problem. At the same time, Trump leaned heavily into America's cultural divide. He fashioned himself as the voice of the forgotten man, the champion of so-called real Americans, those from small towns, rural communities, and blue-collar backgrounds who he claimed were being left behind by progressive elites in coastal cities. In his rhetoric, the villains weren't just political opponents, but immigrants, LGBTQ+ advocates, university professors, and celebrities, anyone who represented change or complexity. Politics under Trump became something more primal. It was no longer about policy details, but identity. To support Trump was to declare who you were and what you stood for. And to oppose him was to risk being cast out of that imagined America he so fiercely defended. The cultural battleground he stoked didn't just shift public discourse, it reshaped the very fabric of national belonging. In the summer of 2025, Donald Trump wasn't just running the country, he was also waging an aggressive campaign against 2 of America's biggest television networks, ABC and CBS. For Trump, this wasn't just political posturing, it was war. It started with ABC. When This Week anchor George Stephanopoulos referenced a legal ruling stating Trump had been found liable for rape, Trump erupted. He called the statement defamatory and filed a lawsuit. Many doubted it would go anywhere, but in a shocking twist, ABC settled. They paid Trump's presidential library $15 million, another $1 million in legal fees, and issued a public apology, an outcome Trump hailed as a total victory over fake news. Critics, meanwhile, saw something else, a sign that even major media companies were caving under pressure from the White House. CBS was next. Trump launched a $20 billion lawsuit against 60 Minutes, claiming they had deceptively edited an interview with Vice President Kamala Harris to influence the 2024 election. While the legal basis was murky, the pressure was real. CBS was in the middle of a high-stakes merger with Skydance Media, one that needed FCC approval. Trump had recently placed a loyalist, Brendan Carr, as FCC chairman. The message was clear: play ball or pay the price. CBS caved. They settled, two agreeing to a $16 million donation to Trump's library and promising more editorial transparency. The network also announced that all future presidential interviews would be aired in full. Days later, the executive producer of 60 Minutes resigned, citing compromised journalistic independence. But Trump wasn't finished. Late-night television became his next battlefield, and Stephen Colbert was the bullseye. The Late Show host had been a longtime critic of Trump, peppering his monologues with biting satire and political jabs. After the CBS settlement, rumors swirled that the new Skydance CBS leadership would push Colbert out. Trump gleefully stoked the flames online, posting on Truth Social, "Colbert's ratings are tanking. The Late Show should be the Gone Show." While CBS denied any plans to cancel Colbert, insiders revealed mounting tension between the host team and new management, especially as Trump's allies hinted at leveraging FCC licenses to influence network programming. Critics saw the whole affair, lawsuits, settlements, threats, and Colbert's uncertain future, not as isolated incidents, but as part of a broader strategy. Trump, they argued, wasn't just challenging media narratives, he was systematically dismantling media independence. By using the machinery of government lawsuits, regulatory power, public intimidation, he was forcing America's most influential platforms to bend. To his base, Trump looked like a strongman taking on corrupt elites. To his opponents, he looked like a president with an authoritarian streak, testing just how far the executive branch could stretch in a democracy. And to media insiders, it was a chilling new era where truth could be litigated, satire punished, and journalism made to kneel. 5. International reputation. On the world stage, Donald Trump's return to the presidency sent ripples far beyond U.S. borders. His steadfast America First approach didn't just reshape domestic policy, it shook long-standing alliances and tested decades of international cooperation. Traditional partners like Germany and Canada found themselves sidelined or openly criticized, leaving once solid friendships strained and uncertain. Trump's abrupt moves, like withdrawing from NATO commitments and pulling the U.S. out of the World Health Organization, left allies scrambling to fill the void. Around the globe, diplomats and leaders alike began to view America less as a reliable partner and more as an unpredictable force. To many, Trump's leadership felt erratic and fiercely nationalist, sparking fears that his presidency was not just isolating the U.S., but destabilizing the fragile balance of international relations. The world watched uneasily as America's reputation shifted from global leader to maverick outsider, redrawing the map of influence one unilateral decision at a time. Donald Trump's foreign policy in 2025 was nothing if not unpredictable, marked by sharp contrasts and blunt declarations that baffled allies and adversaries alike. Among the most striking was his peculiar affinity for Russia and North Korea, countries often viewed with suspicion or hostility by much of the Western world. Time and again, Trump praised Russian President Vladimir Putin, calling him a strong leader and praising their personal rapport. Despite mounting evidence of Russian interference in U.S. affairs, Trump downplayed these concerns, often suggesting cooperation over confrontation. Similarly, his tone toward North Korea was unusually warm, praising Kim Jong-un as a smart negotiator and expressing admiration for the regime's resilience, even as tensions simmered beneath the surface. Yet when it came to China, the European Union, and Africa, Trump's rhetoric turned sharply negative. China was portrayed as America's chief economic and geopolitical rival, a thief of jobs and manipulator of trade. He doubled down on tariffs, trade restrictions, and tough diplomatic stances, fueling a simmering trade war that strained global markets. The European Union wasn't spared either. Trump frequently accused the EU of freeloading on U.S. security guarantees, deriding it as a bureaucratic mess that stifled free trade and failed to pull its weight in NATO. His antagonism extended to harsh words for Germany and France, deepening divisions with traditional partners. Africa, meanwhile, was largely absent from Trump's global vision, except as a target of harsh criticism. He dismissed aid programs as wasted taxpayer money and disparaged African nations as corrupt and unproductive, further alienating a continent that had hoped for more engagement and investment. Through these sharp contrasts, embracing authoritarian leaders while castigating longtime allies and emerging regions, Trump's foreign policy reshaped America's global image. It was a world where old alliances fractured, new partnerships were uneasy, and unpredictability became the new normal. For many observers, this was less a coherent strategy than a reflection of Trump's personal style, blunt, transactional, and often deeply divisive. 6. The 6th of January and Democratic backlash. The 6th of January, 2021, became a defining and dark chapter in Donald Trump's legacy. After months of relentlessly insisting the election had been stolen, Trump took the stage and delivered a fiery speech that many believed lit the fuse for what followed. That day, a violent mob surged toward the U.S. Capitol, shattering the halls of American democracy. The chaos stunned the nation and the world, leaving lives lost and trust broken. The fallout was swift and severe. Trump became the first president in history to be impeached twice, his role in the insurrection forever etched into the collective memory. For millions of Americans, the events of that day marked a turning point where doubt and criticism hardened into something far deeper, a fierce and lasting backlash that would shadow the nation's political landscape for years to come. In a move that stirred fierce controversy, Donald Trump chose to pardon many of the 6th of January protesters, those who had stormed the Capitol in the chaotic bid to overturn the election results. The pardons were seen by supporters as acts of justice and loyalty, rewarding what they considered patriots standing up for election integrity. But to critics, it was a glaring symbol of impunity, a president shielding his allies from accountability and deepening the wounds left by that fateful day. The decision sent shockwaves through the political landscape, further dividing a nation still grappling with the aftermath of that unprecedented assault on democracy. Did we miss something? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.